This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Maura Donley, an associate of the Susquehanna Center for Public Policy. Our usual host, Charlie Greenwald, is on assignment, so I am very, very fortunate to have Jere Strittmatter with me today. So thank you for being here, Jere.
Thank you very much.
Happy holidays.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it's very, very nice to see you. We have one of our favorite guests here today, Jamie Martin, who is the president of APSCUF. And I'm going to say that it is the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties.
Great.
Correct? Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah. I'm so happy.
It's a mouthful.
Yes, it is. We've had you on recently, and we have been talking about the consolidation of the state universities. Issues are ongoing. So why don't you give us a brief update on where the consolidation stands, and then we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty on the issues related to that.
Sure. And so just as a reminder, we have consolidation happening at 6 of our universities across the Commonwealth, 3 in the West, so Clarion, Edinburgh, and California.
Okay.
In the North Central, it's Bloomsburg, Lock Haven, and Mansfield.
And they're consolidating into one
university.
Okay.
In the Western region, they've already developed a name, so it's Pennsylvania Western University, or Penn West.
Okay.
So they do have a name for that particular consolidated university. We're awaiting the name of the one in the North Central.
Probably
Penn Central?
Penn North.
Penn North.
I don't know.
Penn Central North.
Lots of options.
We're awaiting that. In terms of where we are in the consolidation, I guess I'll start with the rationale for it. We're still trying to understand.
Still.
So initially we heard things along the line of it will reduce costs for students. That won't happen. We know it's going to cost more than it saves. So we're aware of that. And then the other rationale was expanding student opportunities, so they would have access to additional majors. That would be a wonderful opportunity for a lot of our students, but now we're beginning to see programs being cut.
Oh.
In the Western region, for example, if a student wanted to major in physics or philosophy, they won't be able to.
Oh.
If they wanted to major in art history, that won't be available.
That does not sound like an expansion of opportunities to me.
And a lot of programs have been reduced to minors or concentrations. In the North Central, it appears as if at Lock Haven, the provost there has said some of the current programs would be put into moratorium there, but will reappear at the new university. So we don't know what that means, except it seems as if some of the programs will only be available on the Bloomsburg campus for face-to-face delivery. We still don't know about the number of online classes students would have to take to complete a degree. We do know that the curriculum will not be ready for the fall of 2022. So just there's a lot happening at a very rapid pace. And I've said a few times it feels as if we're flying the plane while we're building it, which is never
Can't be good.
a safe thing to do.
Right.
And it is very important that they get this right, because well, as we talked about in prior shows, that these are really economic development centers for these regions of the state. And I believe, but you can confirm for me, as far as comparing it with the national averages, that actually the amount of students that we still have going to these 6 are still better than nationally of the comeback. Because of the pandemic, there's definitely a cutback, less people going because of all the disruptions. But isn't that true, that we're really holding our own and actually doing better with still having students with this uncertainty going on attending these 6?
Absolutely. I mean, we did see a small decline last year, which wasn't surprising, but our decline was much lower than the national average. This year it's been a 5.4% decline in enrollment, but given everything going on, I think our students have pandemic fatigue.
Oh.
Yeah,
They're not alone.
They're not alone.
Yeah.
We had the consolidation, so there's a lot of uncertainty about what programs will be available, how many online classes will I have to take. We had 113 retrenchment letters that went out last year at 5 universities. I think that caused a lot of concern. So I wasn't surprised by that decline. I'm interested to see what the application rates are at the 6 universities and throughout the Commonwealth, and that will be something we're watching. I'm also interested in the decline, which students didn't come back, or were they new freshmen that didn't start. So we're still trying to understand those trends and what we might predict for the future. But certainly the uncertainty, I think, is going to impact students.
So if it's not about lowering overall costs, and it's not about lowering costs to students, and it's not about expansion of opportunities, why is this being done?
I don't know.
Okay.
And for my colleagues at those 6 universities, they're really questioning that very thing. Morale is at an all-time low on the campuses because of, again, uncertainty about what is the program going to look like. I've talked to colleagues who say we have students coming onto campus and they're asking, will I be able to major in X? And they're saying, I don't know.
Oh.
What classes will I have to take? We don't know. And the other part is for our student athletes and our coaches. I have concerns that, for example, in the western part of the Commonwealth, where at Penn West, where they said, these programs will no longer exist, beginning in the fall of 2022. I don't know to what extent they've looped the coaches in, so that as they're recruiting student athletes, and if I had an athlete who wanted to major in physics, and they've signed a letter of intent, and now that's not going to be available. So, and we don't know yet, and I'm very hopeful that the NCAA will permit all of the 6 universities to maintain their athletic teams, but we haven't had that decision yet. And so in my mind, I'm wondering, will the NCAA permit the Penn West Edinburgh Fighting Scots basketball team to compete against the Penn West Clarion Golden Eagles basketball team and have that sanctioned by the NCAA and the PSAC? So I think they're just all of those questions, and as we're moving down this train track pretty quickly without the answers to those, and I recognize we can't have answers all at once, but those are big decisions that we don't yet have.
But we do put championship teams together and championship individuals over the years from all the universities, from all 14.
Yes.
And so that is a detriment, and for all this uncertainty. So I'm hoping that, like for instance, like physics that you talked about. Really, I look at it like financial literacy that should be given. Junior achievement takes care of it in the government schools that we have. I would think that physics is one of those things that everyone should take, no matter what your major is, because it's so worthwhile. So that's like very basic, and so I would hope that the legislators and the system would be taking a look at this in a hard way, and when they come back in the session, try to make some changes. Do you think that's possible?
We're always hopeful that that we're going to be able to point out enough of the questions and the lack of clarity, so that people will begin to ask the questions. Can we slow down just a little bit, or make sure we get answers to those questions? And with your comment about the championship teams, another concern we have is at some of our universities we have both Division I and Division II athletics. We don't know if we just don't know what's going to happen at those universities, and so it's leading to uncertainty for the student athletes and some beginning to transfer.
Wow.
It's a lot.
So on top of all these unanswered questions with consolidation, you mentioned earlier, so let's talk a little bit more detail about retrenchments going on at the same time and retirements. First of all, explain to our audience what retrenchments are, because the word it's a term of art for all of you, but it's not commonly known.
Basically an individual losing their job through no fault of their own, not because of disciplinary issues, not because of poor academic record or teaching issues. It's simply a reduction in the workforce that targets individuals who oftentimes have tenure. So last year there were 113 letters that went out. We were able to work to reduce the number who were finally retrenched to 31, but for those 31 individuals, you're talking about your loss of livelihood, potentially having to relocate in the middle of a pandemic, simply to reach a student-faculty ratio as a metric. This year we have 26 letters that were issued at Mansfield and Lock Haven. So 23 at Lock Haven, and 3 at Mansfield, at the universities where they're consolidating, where there are still going to be students enrolled next year. So that part is puzzling. And then we've learned that we had 165 faculty plan to retire this year. So over the last 3 years,
165,
49, almost 47% are at the 6 universities where there's consolidation. And over the last 3 years, it's been about 550 faculty who have retired, so that's about 10% of the total number of faculty across the universities. And then when you add in the retrenchments. So you can understand why morale is low, and there's an expectation that the faculty are going to be doing a lot of the work of the consolidation.
Oh.
In terms of the curriculum development and all recruitment, retention, the retention areas. So they have limited bandwidth.
So the viewers, in those areas specifically, they should be contacting their legislators for sure, and the governor. Are there public venues set up, or should this all be, for the viewers to know? Should this be done just one-on-one with their own legislators and their own senators, or is there something they can be in together and shoot toward?
Prior to the vote in July, there were, I forget the exact number, but a number of open forums for people to speak out and offer comments about the consolidation. And those were overwhelmingly opposed to the consolidation, but it still was voted
So they
forward.
listened.
And so, yeah, at this point, I'm not aware of any other open forums that are going to be occurring. If we would hear about those, we'd certainly make individuals aware. I guess my last concern is that, our students were on campus last year, but they're back this year. And I don't know that there have been any efforts to have open forums or town halls with those students to find out what their questions are, what their concerns are, and to answer those. And they're the ones that our faculty are most concerned about, their well-being and what they have to look forward to in the upcoming years.
So in our last minute here, I know there's probably other issues you're working on as well on behalf of the faculty. Tell us where people can learn more about APSCUF, and tell us a little bit about what other issues. I mean, we're going to be going into budget season soon, so you're going to be having that issue.
Absolutely.
But what else is going on?
We're obviously going to be advocating for additional funding for the state system. The Chancellor did announce, and the Board of Governors did approve, a fairly significant increase in the line item for the state system, additional monies for student aid, direct to student aid, and some money for the relief of the debt on some of the campuses related to residence halls. So we'll certainly be working in tandem with them to advocate for additional funding, so that's one area. And that links up to student affordability and student debt. Those are always things that we are concerned about and speak loudly about when we're talking with legislators. So we need to make college more affordable for our students so that they're not leaving unable to purchase cars, find a home, all of the things that would lead to them leaving the economic drivers and becoming an economic driver in our Commonwealth.
Well, we want to thank you so much for being here today. I hope when we have you back that we have more answers, because it seems like some get answered, and then other new questions arise. So
thanks for bringing all these important subjects to our viewers.
I think a lot of people aren't aware of what's happening in the state system, so that's very informative.
Yes.
So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, and happy holidays to both of
thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for the next segment of Behind the Headlines.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back. On this segment, Jerry and I are very pleased to have with us Mr. Lowman Henry. Lowman, great to have you here.
Good to be here.
Lowman is the chairman and CEO of the Lincoln Institute. And today we're going to talk about a recent poll that you did on a whole host of issues. fascinating results. So we're going to get into the meat of that. But tell us a little bit about the basics of the poll. Who did you poll? How it came about, so that our viewers understand the respondents of this poll.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And we at the Lincoln Institute do this Keystone Business Climate Survey. We conduct the poll twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. And the individuals we poll are the owners or CEOs or top-line executives of businesses. Because our goal with this survey is to find out, what do the people who actually run the businesses think about the state's economy and about major policy issues. So it's very targeted to the people who are actually doing the businesses. And we've been doing this now for, I think we're in our 26th year.
Oh, wow.
And through that period of time, we've always asked a series of questions in each and every poll. So we have a nice little chart that shows us how the economy is going. And if you look back over the last 25 years, the chart fairly closely tracks what's happened at the national level. After the September 11th terrorist attacks, business climate confidence plummeted. Then we had a rebound. Then we had the Great Recession, and it went down. And then most recently, we had COVID. And COVID is still, by the way, something that many, if not most, of our businesses have not recovered from.
Oh, wow.
And so are you finding with the Lincoln Institute, people are very enthusiastic in Pennsylvania? They're looking at the bottle as half full, or are they looking at it as half empty?
They're actually not in a very good mood at the moment. Unfortunately, it was a situation where when we did the spring survey, we saw an uptick in business confidence in Pennsylvania. And when we did the fall survey, that uptick went away and things turned down. And we were finding in this survey that folks have largely, about 2/3, still not recovered from COVID losses or COVID setbacks. They're looking at inflation. A big hindrance for economic recovery at the moment are supply chain issues. And not surprisingly, people can't get workers. And all this has caused the survey results to turn very, very negative in the spring or in the fall survey.
So how do the employers feel about vaccine mandates?
It's interesting. We did ask a vaccine mandate question, and about 1/3 of the employers are going to require their employees to get the vaccine. Now, keeping in mind, this is a survey of business owners, and they can be businesses of all sizes and types. And this survey actually tilted a little more to the larger businesses than usual. And what we find is when the survey sample includes a lot of small businesses, it tends to get a little more conservative. When you hit the larger businesses, it moderates a little bit. So having a large number of bigger businesses in this survey, we found about 1/3 are going to require the mandate because at the time, the Biden administration was saying if you have 100 or more employees, you're going to have to require the mandate. And then we found about another 1/4 that said, well, we'll either require vaccine or periodic testing for COVID. And the others are like, no, we're not going to do that.
So there's plenty of opportunity out there for people who want to work, and the businesses want that. But what other great ahas are there?
In terms of ahas, what really surprised me most about this survey is that the employment levels have not gone back up. Even though businesses can't find people, and perhaps mainly because they can't find people, we did see a slight drop in overall employment in the state. And you would think with all these open positions that you'd see employment rising. That isn't happening. And not only are people not able to find employees, they can't find people who are have even the basic qualifications and the basic competencies that can be trained for positions. So if you can't find enough employees to run your business and you have supply chain issues, and by the way, over 2/3 told us that they have chronic supply chain issues. So especially if you're a manufacturer, if you can't get the supply and you can't get the workers, your outlook on the business climate is not going to be very positive.
So you mentioned that business in general is a little bit grumpy right now. Are they at all optimistic about the future?
It has been normal in this survey over the years for the businesses to be more optimistic about the future than what they have been about the past. We can see a lot of past, one of the questions that we ask every survey is if you look back over the last 6 months, have business conditions in Pennsylvania gotten better or worse? In this case, substantially worse, which isn't good because we've been bad. We took, as you can imagine, with the spring survey last year in 2020, it took a nosedive, and it didn't really bounce back in the fall of 2020. Bounced back a bit last spring, but now that number has turned negative. But throughout all this, business folks have been more optimistic about the future. So there is some optimism about the future, but they're not projecting hiring additional employees. They're not
Any
projecting
growth.
sales growth and things of that sort. Again, they can't get the supply, they can't get the workers, so how can you be optimistic about growth if you can't get the inputs?
That makes sense.
Elections do have consequences, and
Yes.
that's one of the things we haven't talked about here, with that view, and I think it's quite telling. But we'll leave that up to the viewers to contact you if people want to get in touch with you, about their ideas, too, or agreeing with us or disagreeing with us. What's the best way to to interact with you?
We have a couple of websites. We have LincolnInstitute.org, which is our main website for our products. And by the way, the Keystone Business Climate Survey, all the numeric results and the analysis are posted on that website. And we also have it archived going back to about the mid-1990s was when we started having websites and things of that sort. So we do have all that historical data there.
Great.
So if you want to look and say, gee, what were they thinking back in 2011, you can look and see that. We also publish patownhall.com, and patownhall.com has all of our work, but it also has our radio programs. We produce a couple of syndicated radio programs.
I listen to those; they're great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we have Lincoln Radio Journal, which is our state-based program, and we talk about state-related issues. And then we have American Radio Journal, and we have about 260 stations around the country that air it, and we talk national issues there. So all that's on patownhall.com, and we have about 25 other organizations and writers who contribute content to it. So if you want to get a good overview of everything that's happening in the pro-growth community in Pennsylvania, we accumulate it all on that site.
So you mentioned national issues. How is everyone feeling about the infrastructure bill?
Interestingly, in this survey, and keep in mind we're talking to the owners and CEOs of businesses, there was majority support for the infrastructure bill. Now, I happen to think, and this is sort of an interpretation of it more so than data, that most of them were thinking infrastructure, roads, bridges, railroads, airports, things of that sort. And of course, for businesses, and particularly manufacturing, it's big.
Yeah.
So there was support for infrastructure. Now, we all know the infrastructure bill included a lot of things in it that are not really infrastructure. There was a lot of support for the infrastructure bill. However, support for the Build Back Better bill dropped dramatically. It fell to well under 50%. And that, of course, is a lot of social spending and really if you look at the Build Back Better bill, it's a complete redesign of our national economy. And there's not a lot of support for that.
That's a pretty significant change then.
Well,
Rebuilding of our economy. Yeah.
Well, it is, and if you look at, and that you could do an hour show on just Build Back Better bill, but if you look at it, it's really a lot of the green agenda and an effort to rebuild the economy around non-fossil fuels, which of course is a complete impossibility because virtually everything we use, from the plastic of this desk to the fuel in our vehicles, are fossil fuels.
And looking forward, trying to be optimistic, looking at the results. Is there a way, like the Chamber of Commerce or PMA or other groups, use your survey to sort of coordinate to say, well, we're not going to wait for the national and the state people to do it. Why don't we get together as business leaders and take care of the supply chain? Why don't we take care of some of these other problems? Do you feel that there's an undercurrent of that people should just, instead of waiting for the Department of Commerce, to give us another report about what happened 5 years ago? Do you think that there's a way to stimulate and get the Chamber and PMA and all the others to work together to solve these problems rather than trying to wait for government that's never going to solve the problem?
no, government can't solve most of the problems. Government, in fact, has created most of the problems. And one of the things we do whenever we're developing the survey and the questions we want to ask, we go to the organizations that you've mentioned, and we ask them, what do you want to know? What do you want to know about different issues? In this particular survey, we talked about the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and the fact that the Wolf administration is trying to implement it by regulatory fiat rather than going through the legislature. RGGI, which is the nickname for the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, a big issue among a lot of businesses, and it's something that we found there was not a lot of support for it in this poll to begin with, and when the business owners found out that this was not going to be done legislatively, that support even dropped. So we do interact with those groups, and one thing we found is that particularly through COVID, looking to government for the solution. Government was the problem, especially the Wolf administration and its business closure orders and the fact that they had a waiver program that had no rhyme or reason. That tanked a lot of businesses. And the survey found they haven't recovered from that. And part of that is because you still have mask mandates. Well, one court says you have to have them, another court says you don't. It changes from day to day. A lot of the businesses can't figure out what it is they're required to do. You go to the vaccine mandate. Well, the Biden administration said we're going to have a vaccine mandate. Well, now the courts have stepped in and are saying no. Well, will it happen in January or won't it? Nothing is more harmful to business than uncertainty. And we've had nothing but uncertainty for the last 2 years.
So in our last minute here, there were a couple of additional issues that you touched on in your poll. One was school choice and the broad issue of government spending. Do you want to tell us just briefly about how those turned out for you?
The education freedom question was a very important one. And what the question was to allow, there's a legislative proposal that would allow parents to choose a school choice option other than the government school for their student and have the state portion of that revenue, which is about $6,000 a year, follow the student. That would allow parents more options, and particularly after COVID, when parents found out what government schools were teaching, they want more options, and there was broad-based support for that.
Good. So we covered where we can get more additional information. Are there any other issues you're working on at the Institute as we close out here?
Well, we're working on a wide variety of issues, and education freedom, by the way, is a major issue for us.
Okay.
Representative Andrew Lewis has a bill that would really expand the ability of parents in Pennsylvania to have school choice options. We saw with that election in Virginia for governor where these sort of issues, always important, have really risen to the top.
I foresee you coming back in the spring after your next survey, and maybe we can get some charts and graphs going about a couple years of COVID and see how things are going. But
Sure.
I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing this information with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
We'll be back next week with another episode of Behind the Headlines.